My guest on this week's episode of Suds Search is Dan Mondello, co-founder and CEO of Rank Really High. Dan is a serial entrepreneur. He co-founded 2 companies, Dealer Teamwork and Home and Local Services, prior to launching his newest project. You've probably heard the cliche that there's riches and niches. Dan has spent his career deeply understanding the unique needs of specific verticals. He started out working in automotive, then started a business aimed at home service professionals, and now Dan is working with cannabis dispensaries. A few years ago, Dan noticed that cannabis and marijuana-related products were being legalized in numerous states. He secured the domain name rankreallyhigh.com, but it was just an idea for a few years until Dan took the leap and started the agency. Today, Rank Really High offers e-commerce web development and a suite of digital marketing services tailored to the unique needs of cannabis dispensaries. How has Dan been able to shift from automotive to home services to cannabis? How does his agency approach the myriad compliance requirements for advertising cannabis products? How much do his clients know and understand about SEO and PPC? I'm going to ask Dan these questions and many more. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Dan Mondello. We'll talk about why he's chosen to make websites on WordPress. We'll spend some time talking about the cannabis industry and conference scene. And I'll finish our conversation discussing whether he's benefited from first mover principles. All right, Dan, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this one. I have a lot of questions to ask you, but I want to start here. So take me back to, I think this is a winter of 2021. I may have my timeline wrong, but at this point, you've been a serial entrepreneur. You have had 2 really successful ventures that I think by any standard have gone great. So you decide, I want to make a change, and I want to make a change into cannabis. Mm-hmm. Why cannabis? What did you see at that time that made this move so appealing?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I wish it was a really beautiful, fun story, but unfortunately it starts with a little bit of heartache. I was living in Minneapolis working on those former 2 startups you mentioned earlier, and my mother got terminal cancer and was in hospice care, and I needed to leave Minneapolis to tend to her. I was one of her caregivers, and everything changes when a parent is in that kind of condition. You reprioritize everything in life, and things that felt important to me before started to feel a little bit less important to me after that. Yeah. And I always wanted to do cannabis. I remember back in 2018, living in Minneapolis and watching all my friends back home in Boston posting selfies outside of dispensaries, lines around the building. And I just thought to myself, that's so cool. And then I went and looked at their websites and I was like, oh, that's a shame. And, I was a passive onlooker from 2018 to about the very end of 2020 when I started to really start thinking, there's something here. This is an area I can attack. So.
Well, interesting. I think one of the things, this is a marketing show. There's a phrase in marketing, there are riches and niches. And you've made a career out of focusing on niches. So first car dealers, home services, now cannabis. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to explore that choice with you. They're really narrowly focused in one industry rather than, you don't want to be an e-commerce provider for everybody. You want to be an e-commerce provider for cannabis now. It seems like that intense focus has been important to your success. How so? Am I overstating that maybe?
You're not. Focus is really the key word there as well. If you couldn't tell by my jittery demeanor, I have pretty severe ADHD. And what's really interesting about ADHD is that as a child, it was a pain in the neck. I couldn't get anything done. As an adult, it's been more of a blessing and an entrepreneurial like growth hack for me. It allows me to hyper focus on things, especially things that really get me up in the morning. And I am a cannabis user, medical card holder. Being a person who's had ADHD in my life, my whole life. Back in the 90s, there was a lot of medications that were kicked around and tried, and a lot of kids got overprescribed things, myself included. And when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I decided I no longer wanted to be one of those jittery Adderall type of people, legal Adderall, prescribed Adderall, and I wanted something different. And I had done some reading and some research, and cannabis kept coming up as an alternative to all these stimulants. I tried it in a medical capacity this time, not like high school running into the woods after school, and it was a game changer for me. It allowed me to have level of focus, a level of calmness that I had not experienced before. And, it has that real sentiment for me right now. My mother also used it to deal with pain while she was on in her last couple days. My brother was in the cannabis industry briefly, in the cultivation side of things. It just spoke to me. And, when I was in the car business, I used to tell people when they were having panic attacks at work, I'd say, hey, relax, it's okay. We're not saving lives here. The problem will be there tomorrow. Why don't you take a run around the building and come back and see if you can't get a fresh set of eyes on it. In cannabis, I don't feel like we're saving lives here either, but I like to think that we're improving them, giving alternatives to Pfizer and all those big evil companies out there. No offense to Pfizer or anything, but giving people an alternative that's safe and plant-based, I think is really important.
Yeah, interesting. And one of the things that I thought about is it takes a long time to get credibility in any one of these verticals. So again, automotive, I'm still trying to learn some of the jargon. It's like I don't know all of it by now, but I think there are these people who are convert celebrities in automotive or home services, for instance. We know these people, but then they stay in automotive forever, right? They don't go out. So you established that kind of credibility, and you just moved on to something else multiple times. When you did that, was there any trepidation about leaving that comfort zone, say, in automotive and starting over in something totally different?
I'll get into too many details. Some of these moves weren't 100% my decision. They were ones I live with, and I'm happy that they happen. Everything happens for a reason in life. But, it's a great question. I guess this really comes down to the entrepreneurial spark. I don't like doing one thing for a really long period of time that doesn't interest me. I will always have a soft spot for automotive. I still cherish and appreciate all the people in automotive. I talk to them daily. Brian Pash, Kevin Fry, Greg. I've got David Metter. I got a lot of great friends in the industry, and I try to talk to them very frequently, and they've been so good to me. But you know what? If you want to, I think it was Elon Musk who was asked one time, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who need help or words of encouragement? And Elon Musk said, I'm going to paraphrase this, tell entrepreneurs that if they need words of encouragement, don't become an entrepreneur. And it really is true. It's not a role for the faint of heart. It is a constant battle from the moment you get up to the moment you fall asleep, and then it starts over again. I was raised to not fear these types of things and to try everything and anything you can to make it happen. There's another famous adage I'm going to use here as well. The story of Colonel Sanders, and I'll shorthand this as well. Colonel Sanders created the recipe for KFC original recipe when he was like 50 or 60 years old. And he spent the next 10 years or 15 years knocking on doors of this recipe, trying to sell it. And he kept getting doors slammed in his face, being told no. And he realized, after hundreds and hundreds of no's and years of hearing no doesn't mean no. No means not yet or not now. So he just kept knocking on those doors and eventually got his deal. And I think he was around 70 years old when he became a millionaire, but he didn't give up. And you really can't in this game. No matter what industry it is, you cannot. It's the guys who give up who you don't read about. It's the guys and girls who never give up, the ones that are on posters and have movies made about them. So
love that. Yeah, that's clip. So I want to shift gears if we could talk about the companies that are your clients.
Yeah.
And the first thing that comes to mind is that for marijuana-based businesses, regulation, legalese, headaches. Do you get dragged into inane compliance meetings over and over again? What are the primary considerations here? Am I overblowing that?
Well, to use some technical terminology, it's an absolute shit show in this industry right now. I hope that you can probably bleep that out for me later. But no, it is an industry of challenges. It is an industry of immense regulation. It's constantly changing. What I tell people who ask me, what's it like being in cannabis? I tell them, I'm a startup working with startups in a startup industry. I mean, all bets are off. And I'll tell you the one thing I learned very quickly. I went into cannabis with some acclaim. I had a couple of companies I'd done. I'd been a 2-time Google Premier Partner, Microsoft accredited business. I mean, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had a great book of strategies that would just translate perfectly. I'll tell you, you and your audience here, if you want to get into cannabis, take everything you thought you knew, throw it out the window, because none of it's going to translate easily. I never even knew what an account suspension looked like in cannabis until I got into. I never knew what a Google suspension looked like until I entered cannabis, and I've been doing this for better half of 10 or 11 years now. But yeah, regulation. We were really, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we were really smart in how we approached our technology play and our stack. We found out about these two companies called iHeart Jane and Dutchie, which are the two biggest e-commerce companies in the cannabis space right now. And about a few months into this project, doing some research, we learned that they both had APIs, very powerful APIs, that would allow us to take these cannabis menus from being in an iframe, which has very little SEO value and is hard to customize and has a litany of other shortcomings, and truly cater and build an inventory feed very much like a car dealership. So we kind of tried to build our company to just pull an inventory from these two sources easily, customize it. And I know you would ask me about regulation. I am coming back to that. One of the really great things about working with these companies is that Dutchie and Jane had already put a considerable amount of resources and people and manpower into learning all the different markets and all the regulatory body. So I actually get to piggyback on their learnings and their technology. They kind of do most of the compliance for us. What we basically do is take what they have and publish it in a way that Google can see to a website. A lot of this is very similar to what the automotive industry saw from a little company called Dealer Inspired, Joe Chura, those guys. Yeah. I remember being in automotive back in like 2013 and using dealer.com, and I'm still a huge dealer.com fan. I think that they still have some pretty kick-ass stuff to this day. But when I saw Joe and his team come out with a WordPress-based modular inventory controlled website, I said, this is the future. Because, in the industry, in the car industry, if you left a dealership to go work for another dealership, 9 out of 10 times you were learning how to use Dealer on or a different CMS altogether. Everybody in marketing knows WordPress. Everybody knows how to write a blog. So hiring developers, this is all growth hack shortcuts in using a WordPress-based solution. So
yeah, and I just in full transparency, we don't make websites for car dealers, but we work with a lot of car dealer clients. And Dealer Inspire we have no dog in that fight, but Dealer Inspire is our preferred vendor for the reason you mentioned. That WordPress is so powerful. So I want to take this down into the actual service offerings if I could.
Sure.
So my understanding was that advertising on Google for marijuana, even recreational marijuana products, was some violation of their policies or something like that. What solutions are available to dispensaries and those related businesses within the ad space, like within Google, within Microsoft, within what are you allowed to do? What aren't you allowed to do today?
If you Google Ads cannabis, you're going to come to a page called dangerous services or products. And right. Cannabis is right there next to heroin, opioids, crystal meth, machine guns. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of in the wrong categorization to begin with. I'm not going to sit here on my stoop here and start saying, oh my God, why does Pfizer get to advertise? Why does Anheuser-Busch get to advertise? But we're going to draw the line in the non-habit forming medicinal property plant. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I should, but I'm not going to today. You're not. There are very clear guidelines on what you can and cannot do. And, again, 2-time premier partner, I thought we'd just step into this thing and just kick so much ass. It would be crazy. It wasn't like that. It's hard. And you really do have to throw out your entire book of strategies when you get into this business. Basically, Google looks at three things: keywords, ad copy, landing page. And you can have some cannabis-related keywords, but you cannot use those keywords in your ad copy, and you cannot use any of that content on your landing page. So if you kind of read between the lines and really look closely at what the strategies are that are left after you realize what you can't do, you figure out there's a few things you can, and you focus on that. So one of the things we really looked at without giving away too much of our secret sauce is advertising a dispensary's loyalty program. I mean, when you're advertising a loyalty program or a membership program, I'm not advertising to buy marijuana. I'm advertising a membership program that allows you to do that eventually, but also save on products, accessories like, glassware or, books, rolling papers, that kind of thing. So you have to get really creative. And we can't take all the credit. We had a lot of great relationships we formed while I was at Dealer Teamwork, while I was at Home and Local Services, with people who worked at Google. And I was just very fortunate to have kept those relationships strong, so that when we did start hitting walls, we had people whose door we could knock on and say, hey, what are we doing wrong here? Or how can we think differently? And they were very helpful in guiding us. And, we went from having accounts suspended left and right back in October of last year to, knock wood, we haven't had a single problem since. And we have ads go down every day, but we're able to learn from those issues, what we see in the policy guidelines, and make adjustments. And I'm happy to say that we're running. We're going to crack over $2 million in paid search before the end of the year.
All right.
Yeah.
Very nice. That's awesome. So here's what's not hard for me to understand is how important local SEO would be for these dispensaries. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to you from Chicago. My office is in the West Loop of Chicago. I live in the suburbs, I don't know, 12, 15 miles away or something like that. And I will pass on my drive home, without going out of my way, 12 different dispensaries, right? At least.
Yep.
So this is becoming an extremely competitive space in my city. New dispensaries are going up all the time. Google is using its local algorithm to rank these sites.
Right.
My question is simple. How sophisticated are these businesses? Do they know how important local SEO is for them? Are they aware of its power?
They're beginning to learn. There are definitely, there's a whole science here of local SEO for cannabis dispensaries, where if you really look at, if a business really wants to kick ass on local SEO, especially if they're coming into a market that already has some level of saturation, the naming convention of what you name your business, the DBAs you file, are going to be incredibly important, because we're not in those old days of local SEO that Greg would strangle me if I said this out loud. I'm going to say it anyways. Keyword stuffing the business name. I mean, those days are beginning to be behind us, because Google is changing algorithms. It's now the business profile or whatever. They've made it really hard to quote unquote game the system. So, when you can't game the system, you need to really think about what the name of your business is going to be. Like if I was opening a dispensary, I'd call it Dan Mondello's Marijuana Dispensary, Boston, Massachusetts. And then if anyone tried to suspend my profile, I'd be like, here's my DBA, come at me. But, a lot of time for an established business, they're running at somewhat of a deficit. The ones that are ranking really high in the map pack are the ones that have been there the longest, gathered the most reviews, done the most things right. Rank Really High has been pretty fortunate that we were pretty early into this game, not in California, but on the East Coast, we were in pretty early. And what we've learned is that when you can't do those old tricks, one of the things that's really important is having a website connected very closely to your Google My Business profile and other local listing profiles, so that when someone types in a, not dispensary near me or not Dan Mondello Marijuana, they type in a product like Fernway Vaporizer or Goodfeels drink tinctures. When you have a website that has content on it from those manufacturers that Google can read via a Dutchie or Jane API published, the local search results in the map app will sometimes say their website mentions Vaporizer or their website mentions Fernway Vapes. When you have all that content, you make your profile more relevant. So you're able to outmaneuver some of these established businesses that have been there for a while without doing anything hacky or outside of Google's guidelines. Does that make sense?
So interesting. Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and it seems I'm really interested in this transition from auto to cannabis with you. And one of the things that I could think of right away is that the cannabis industry is a movement in a way that car dealers just aren't as much. This is still illegal in many states.
It is.
It's got a little bit of a rebel quality to it. It's got a silliness quality attached to the industry. You can feel it when you're walking around conference floors and stuff like that. Internally, for your own team, you're marketing to this community. Do you focus on matters that are important to the broader cannabis industry? And if so, how do you do that?
Could you give me an example of what you're asking? I want to make sure I understood properly.
No. So I would say when I'm at conferences, this idea that cannabis is not legal in all 50 states, this is important. Like, this is important to your customer, even if you're a dispensary owner in Chicago where it's totally legal, it's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
That it's illegal in Indiana, for example, is going to be a topic of conversation in the hallways of those conferences.
Yep.
And so there's a totally different sort of zeitgeist at these conferences than there would be at a car dealer conference, for example.
Mm-hmm.
When you guys think about that internally, you're trying to target these dispensaries. How do you tap into the issues that are important to that industry? Or is that not so much? You just want to keep your head down and focus on writing website code and doing that kind of thing?
Well, we definitely want to write a lot of code, but no, I mean, there's been a stigma. This has been a plant and a product that has been demonized for hundreds of years in this country, or at least 100 years in this country. And if you look at the history of why it's been illegal, and you really dig in, it's stupid. It boils down to racism. It boils down to a threat against established medicine companies. The rope industry definitely played its part in suppressing this product from being used in the masses. I mean, in the 1800s, this product and other more dangerous products like cocaine, which I'm not advocating for, I want to make sure I'm clear about that, were used in a medical context. And it wasn't until racism and Pfizer and companies like that got involved. I'm really bashing Pfizer today. I apologize about that. But it's when money got involved that it became a problem. So, part of the responsibility when you enter the cannabis industry is to try to end stigmas. Now, I'm not the kind of person who's going to be smoking a joint on your show or any other show. And when I go to conferences, I try to stay away from that. I definitely smoke weed. I definitely use cannabis, but I try to do it in the privacy of my own home or with friends. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for that. I do think that. I wouldn't drink a beer in the middle of a workday either. I mean, it's just a matter of, keeping up some appearances. But at the same time, I want to help end the stigma. Every company in the cannabis space that really cares, and most of them really do, is trying to end stigma. It's not a dangerous product. It kills no one. It helps many. It's done far less harm to the world than things like alcohol have done. And I think that needs to be recognized. So, at the conferences, you'll walk out. I just got back from MJ BizCon, which is like the NADA of the cannabis industry out in Vegas, at the International Convention Center. It's so weird. Like, you walk outside of a NADA conference and there's nobody out there. There's a few people running around on cell phones. At a cannabis conference, you walk out there and there's everything from people wearing tie-dyed shirts smoking joints to guys in Armani suits of big gold watches smoking pot with the person in the tie-dyed shirt. It's an incredible scene. But to answer your question, there's a responsibility here, and it's to help push the plant forward. And it's not because of the monetary gains. Yes, we're in this business to make money, but we're also in this business to help people. And it really comes back to we're not saving lives necessarily, but we'd like to improve them. So.
I love that. All right. Well, that's very cool. The last thing to ask you about is, do you guys, this may be a misperception, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you guys are benefiting from like kind of a first mover principles, where you're the first company doing this sort of work really well. Okay, it's true that there are other companies that make websites for dispensaries. There are people. There are not as many who do exclusively for dispensaries. That focus that we talked about earlier isn't there. I actually looked it up before I got on here. A lot of these companies who do just websites aren't very good, if I'm being honest. So, how do you categorize the competitive landscape right now? Are there a lot of companies offering solutions to these dispensaries, or are you kind of the first in the door and you've benefited from those kind of first mover principles?
I benefited directly from the automotive industry. I mean, we're definitely an early mover, and not to speak ill of my competitors. I really don't think I have a direct competitor, and I'm not trying to be arrogant or a jerk or anything. There are two types of companies in the space right now that we, I guess, compete with. The agency that makes you this very beautiful homepage and then latches on an iframe and calls it a day, and the company that just does the SEO menu but doesn't design the website for you. We're neither of those things. And I tell people all the time, if you want a nice looking website, go call Joe Harry down the street. Rank Really High doesn't do that at all. What we do is we build a omni-channel platform for cannabis, very similar to a car dealership website, where you're able to suck information in, publish that information out on Google Ads, on the website as well. So we're a platform as a service play. That's kind of how we look at it. And we do build really nice looking websites, but ultimately we're trying to pivot that as well. And competitors out there, we're willing to work with anybody. We built our platform on WordPress intentionally, not just so that we could make money off of WordPress-based dispensary websites. We have a plugin only solution that we're happy to sell to anyone, whether it be an in-house talent who already works at a dispensary, and most of these sites are already on WordPress to begin with. We can latch right onto your existing infrastructure. If you have an agency you like, it's a very simple product to use. We can do that as well. So we try to like kind of play nice and not really engage or think we have competitors. That said, we definitely have people who don't like us and say some pretty nasty things about us. But you know, I'm one of those weird people who actually love haters. I actually said on LinkedIn like yesterday, I love haters. I call them success fuel because that's what they really are. They just push us to make even more crazy cool stuff. But back to like early mover stuff. Yeah, in cannabis, rank really high as a super early adopter, super early mover. But I want to pay homage back to where it belongs. It's from the automotive industry. We built a website. We're treating our partners who work with us on the inventory side like ADP and Reynolds and other smaller DMS companies. I love these companies. They're great companies. Ultimately, I want to work with a dispensary, and I'll take data from anybody. Eventually, we're going to be a big middleware play where we're like, here's how you work with us, plug in your stuff, and we'll work with POS companies as well. But yeah, it's automotive that taught me how to do this. And I want to encourage other entrepreneurs in automotive, take a look at cannabis because there's so much room in this industry for outbound call center, for managed chat solutions. There's room for other companies doing paid search. There's just take anything that we saw just kick ass in automotive. There's a fit in cannabis, and no one else is really doing it right now. And you know, we're looking for other companies to partner with that can bring some of these really smart things we did in automotive and connect them in cannabis.
That's really interesting. So there is a tie-in. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation, Dan. I like what you guys are doing. I think you're very impressive. If people want to learn more about you or rank really high, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys? What's your favorite social media? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, you can easily find me on LinkedIn. That's probably my favorite social way to talk to me. You know, I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well. Feel free. RankReallyHigh.com. We have very easy to use contact forms, and you can schedule a meeting with me right from there as well. And I'm one of those weird people who will talk to anybody about any topic at any time. So bring it on.
Awesome. Well, you have been a pleasure to talk to. For everybody watching, we'll be back next week with another episode of Suds Search. We will not have a guest from Pfizer, Dan. Don't worry, they're okay here. No, just another digital marketer next week. So I'm going to sign off for now. I'll give everybody a virtual cheers, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Suds Search.
Cheers, guys.